skal ønske velkommen til Clemens. Han vår globale CTO in Cloud and DevOps. So welcome, Clemens. Yeah. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Oh. It is always very difficult to understand when you are introduced in a language you don't know, actually. It happened to me once in Denmark when the audience started to laugh after my name. I don't know what happened there, but I still don't know, actually. Okay, something completely different, actually. I'm not going to talk specifically about testing, but more about how you can use your environments. Your environments to do testing actually in the most efficient way, but also definitely with some sprinkling of sustainability around it. How you can look at that. So I call it my DevOps team environments, because DevOps teams are using multiple environments. And when I'm building up the portfolio around cloud and DevOps for Sogeti, I'm always looking into what brings the most business value. Because business value, actually, that's the return of investment of everything what we are doing. And we are helping organizations to move faster on the creation of that business functionality, because then they are ready for infinite change. And this is actually, I'm happy Michiel Bereel is also here. We wrote a story together around navigating infinite change for organizations, and we will share the link to this story, actually how we are helping organizations to drive and be ready for those new innovations. When I'm looking at our teams, at your teams, it should be very easy to do it the right way. And then that's definitely for a test audience, they are immediately thinking, oh yeah, you have that cloud guy again. But I will show you how we are making it very easy for teams to do it the right way. And then also helping them to be productive on business functionality. And again, business functionality before lunch. And we are using DevOps environments for it. And when I talk about DevOps environments, I talk about all the environments a team uses to create that business functionality. It's definitely the DevOps machine, the workstation. I'm dragging around mine constantly with me. I'm living more with it as with my wife. And I'm really happy with that machine. And that's what developers want. And developer, that's also testers. That's, for me, it's the same story. Then you have your DevOps platform, your CI/CD, your backlog tracking, and everything what the team uses to build and compile and test and validate your system in an automatic way. And then finally, those applications are going to land on an application landing zone, an application environment. And in cloud, we definitely call that cloud landing zones. And all those three environments, we can start discussing, and that's what we will do. So I already mentioned the developer machine, the tester machine, the workstation, what you have in your hand, actually. That's where we are quite happy with. And I know from myself, I want to have every year a new one. Because there are new specs out there. I want to build more cooler, more powerful programs. And actually, I think this is the least sustainable thing what we can do there. Buying new machines, buying new hardware every year. And that's actually what I need to have to keep me happy. And as we always love to say, happy developers write great code. So we want to have those developers, those DevOps team members as happy as possible so that they can build the systems, can do everything what they want. And that's actually quite easily. Because roughly 10 years ago, I was responsible in the Netherlands for the product development teams, as we call it. at that time. And we were doing a lot of innovation around new products, new capabilities. And we had a lot of challenges with the workstations we got from Group IT, from the internal IT services. So what I started to do, I took my own credit card and I started to create virtual machines on the cloud for my team members. Then I recognized there are some challenges by doing that. Because the challenge is, at first, everybody in my team was very happy. But then my manager got less happy because the money what was spent on the cloud was getting quite high, actually. And that's what I'm saying. Developers are lazy by default. They are creating all kinds of machines, but they don't shut them down. So what I started to build, it's in the upper right corner, a kind of small portal for my team members where they can start, stop machines very easy. I even made it so easy for them that they can put a schedule in there. Start the machine at 9, shut it down at 5. Or I even made it more easy, that when they had a small app on their phone, when they entered the parking place of the company, of the office, the machine went on. And when they moved away, the machine went down. And that way I controlled the costs of my machines. And again, when you control the costs of your machine, it also will be more sustainable, definitely. I gave them some small graphs in there, like when was it on, when was it not on, and also some direct costs insights. What are you doing? And when you are making some kind of change, when you buy a bigger machine and create a bigger machine, you see the costs go up and those kinds of stuff. That gave my team members insight in how they are consuming the cloud and the machines they have in place. But I also recognized not everybody is that cloud savvy. They don't understand how to create a machine. So we started to create a lot of templates for them. And those templates had also all kinds of testing tools on top of it. So it was quite easy for team members to be productive before lunch. And that's what we did already 10 years ago. It was very efficient, and this solution, we called it at that time OneShare, is still used by many companies, actually. Then definitely Microsoft saw this, and they started to create something similar. And I had a lot of discussions with Microsoft also on this topic, because we as sogeti, we are not a product company. We want to make it very good for us to make business functionality for our customers. So I was actually quite happy that Microsoft embraced the idea of what we put in place with OneShare and made it Azure Dev Test Labs. And with Azure Dev Test Labs, actually all the thoughts what we have put into our solution OneShare was also in Azure Dev Test Labs available. Like the templates, they added recipes. So when you want to create a machine, you can run a recipe and then it was a test machine. Or you can run another recipe and then it was a developer machine. It was quite powerful. They also had auto stop and auto start behind it. I know from the product manager who created this, he also created that mobile app with the geo-fencing around it, that it switched on and off. But at that time, Microsoft was not that in the mobile area. So that one was never released. And they give some very nice cost insights what happened there. And actually, Microsoft earned a lot of money with this product because every virtual machine what customers create on Azure has this functionality now behind it. Auto stop, auto start, costs insights, predictions, and all of kinds of information. Because they are giving a lot of free Azure credits to organizations to start playing with. And then they immediately switch on this. So also for Microsoft, it was actually a very good way to save money. And again, and that's a little bit the gray area of cloud. Also, when we now talk sustainable, it's also more efficient. And I call it the gray area of cloud because it feels a little bit like greenwashing. We were doing it already 10 years ago. Now we call it sustainable. Then we called it saving money. It's that easy. So Azure Dev Test Labs, creating your machines, your developer, your DevOps teams, member environment in the cloud. This evolves even further. And last year, Microsoft released DevBox. And DevBox is an even more advanced mechanism to create your developer machine in the cloud. And you see that on this right side, on the left side, how many CPU you can set on. These are more CPUs as I have on my laptop, and I have a quite big laptop. So when I want to just do some heavy workload, I want to run a lot of tests, for example, a very heavy workload, I can even 16 CPUs, I even can switch on some GPUs, which I want to validate it with machine learning and all of kinds of stuff. It's a very good mechanism to start playing around with workloads in the cloud, with your developer environments and test environments in the cloud. What you see on this right side, that's actually an evolvement about I want to have a configuration and the recipes of my machine in the cloud. But now we are putting this developer or test machine, DevOps team environment, as a configuration, as code, next to our Git repo, into our Git repo, next to the cloud, next to the application code, and next to the test cases which are in place. So this is a definition of a developer environment. And I have got it also on my machine. The moment that I start a project, which runs, for example, on Linux with Ruby, and I've got some validations in there, I say just open Visual Studio Code, and then Visual Studio Code, my integrated development environment, sees, hey, you have a definition of your machine ready in here. Should I create that environment for you? And then it creates that environment on my own machine. So I don't need, because I'm running 5 different projects, I don't need to have 5 different laptops. I can create that environment over and over again because it's straight into my Git repo next to my application code, next to my test code. This also can run in the cloud. And GitHub, for example, calls it GitHub code spaces, where you can say, or you can go to a Git repository on github.com, and there you can say, start machine. And from there on, the machine will be created. You can do your coding, you can do your testing, you can execute everything what you want. And then you say, I'm done, you close the browser again, and the machine is gone again. Very, 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 very cool mechanism, what we can embrace at this moment, and what we actually should start doing. I always get immediately the question, also from Rick, what about my network connection? You need to have network connections anyway. But this is, for example, open browser, RDP, or SSH protocols. They are very stable and very mature nowadays. No problems there. That was my developer machine. So start playing with these scenarios, because it will save you a lot of money and you will make very happy developers, very happy testers when they can create those large machines themselves. On the DevOps platform, it gets a little bit in a different area because those DevOps platforms like Team Foundation Server, like GitLab, like Jenkins, GitHub, Bitbucket, you name it, there are hundreds of them. And I always recommend start with the SaaS version of it. Because the SaaS version, you don't have to run it yourself. It's so easy. I think we at Sogeti were one of the first who adopted Azure DevOps, because I was so sick of running a Team Foundation server on-prem myself. And it costs a lot of money because I need a huge SQL database behind it and all the updates and that kind of stuff. And that moment we started, it was Team Foundation Preview, tfspreview.com. And still when I look into when it emerged quite heavily, at when our environment was created. Most Microsoft people don't believe it because it was 2 years before the product was released, actually. That was quite cool, actually. And so the DevOps platform, that's what our teams are using to compile the code, to test the code, to build the code, to deploy the code. CI/CD. And just when we're looking at testing, you run your tests in that SaaS product. That requires a lot of compute. Running those tests wisely and choose how you want to run and how often you want to run your tests is quite important. We, for example, start to release 100 times a day. When I have a load test into my CI pipeline or CD pipeline, and I run a load test 100 times a day, it's a little bit overdone, and it costs a lot of money, and it also consumes a lot of resources. And that's why we have all those kinds of dashboards. How long did the tests execute? How long did it perform? And what is it all consuming there? This is not the only one what we are doing with our CI/CD platforms, with our DevOps platforms. This is, for example, a small reference architecture, not too complex, what a DevOps team does. They start with the business case, making the backlog, starting to write code, using some unit testing, doing some application security testing, deploying it, doing some canary releases or chaos testing and that kind of stuff. This is everything what a team does. And you need to choose wisely. Because, for example, when I started to compile my code, and then I'm storing it into a package manager or storing it in any repository, then it consumes some storage, actually. Then you think, okay, yeah, it's just application code. It can't be that much. But I just got a small email from our GitHub maintenance team. We were indeed deploying and compiling 100 times a day. And the package was roughly 30 megabytes, not that big. But we were storing it for 30 days, 100 times a day, and we were running out of storage space, actually. Although it is done all automatically, it's done on a SaaS product, but it's also consuming a lot of resources. So I always discuss with the teams, how are you doing it? Can we optimize? Can we run it more efficient? Definitely from my perspective, I want to create business functionality very fast. I want to have this pipeline executed as fast as possible. Again, a little bit greenwashing, because when this goes as fast as possible without consuming a lot of resources, it's also more sustainable, it is more efficient. Got it? Then we have a few new things what's coming up. This is Code Pilot. It's coming from GitHub, and it is predicting what kind of code you are going to write. And it starts to create that code. It's quite cool, because it saves me a lot of time writing code. And in this scenario, it starts to generate test cases for you based on the interpretation of your written code. So it's a little bit smarter as normal test case generation tools and like that. We are built ourselves, for example, also a Dev Assist, where a developer gets some advice. Hey, you are changing this code. We would recommend to run these kinds of test cases. But when I talked with the person who's responsible for running GitHub, actually, as a SaaS product, I asked him immediately, how sustainable is this? And then he said, oh, he didn't look at that, but it costs a lot. And they started with, I think, roughly $36 per user per month, but it costs to run this AI engine. And then when you think about the license of GitHub, it's, I think, $16. So they didn't make any money anymore by running this. And you can imagine how much compute it takes to build this. So choose wisely also on those kinds of AI tools which are seeing popping up if there is really a good business case and a return of investment to generate the unit test, for example. Because I showed this to Rick, he doesn't believe it's a good unit test. Last environment, and I think this is the most looked at environment from a testing perspective. How can I create my test environment? How can I create my acceptance test environment? How do I know that production looks the same as what I just tested in that environment? And this is actually the only area where I have a lot of discussion about with testers who are responsible for the quality of the product. How does that look like and how does it work? And me, part of cloud, we are using the cloud environments for it. I've got a very nice picture here now. Ladies, how much time do I have? I have a family picture now. Ah, thank you. It looks very nice, thank you. I'm using application environments for it. And that's the cloud landing zone, as we call it. Cloud landing zones, we create them automatically. And we create them automatically, and it looks like this. So I want to confuse you all now. This is a cloud infrastructure. Just to explain a little bit, it's just a normal hub-spoke networking mechanism. A hub, that's more a jump stone, a step stone. That's where you go in, and then your applications are actually in the spokes. So when you create an application, you create many of these, for example, because that's where your application is hosted. We are provisioning, that's what cloud and cloud infrastructure engineers are doing, these kinds of environments automatically. Not done manually, but all automatically. And we are doing that with some default practices behind it, where we are looking into that every time that we run this script, every time we are provisioning this infrastructure, it will be completely the same. Immutable infrastructures. That's the one thing. We are doing that from day one. We don't start clicking around in Azure portals or AWS consoles. We are starting to automate automatically. That's what I often do with teams who are saying, I've automated everything. Then they say, okay, then I delete your Azure subscription. Yeah, no! Then they forgot to automate stuff. But that's a very good mechanism to rerun it, and that they can see what they missed in the automation to run it over and over and over again. This is definitely a very important practice, what teams are embracing continuously. We want to have it modularized, definitely, because you want to have those building blocks, those parts provisioned very easily. But all is automated. And this team, which has a cloud landing zone for Azure, I'm pushing them to have this ready in one day. Just setting it up in one day, ready, and it will be always the same. And because why it's always the same? Because the templates which are behind it, this service catalog, what you see over here, number one, those templates are always the same. They are validated, they are checked, and that's what we call as cloud engineers infrastructure as code. And those cloud infrastructure as code, we are creating either the whole landing zone for, or we are provisioning them to the different business projects so that they can deploy it into their spokes, as I just mentioned, all the same way, over and over again. And that's the whole idea of cloud infrastructures, that you have it immutable every time the same way. Very important. We are using this service catalog, for example, and that service catalog, that's quite cool, that has the description of the cloud resource. That's what you see over here in JSON. But we are also validating it if it's compliant. And because we understand what is written here, we also know if this template, this cloud resource, will be sustainable. Because, for example, this is a description of a virtual machine. And when that virtual machine has auto stop disabled, we will say it's no, this is not sustainable. And the sustainability recommendation will get to 1 and saying, hey, you need to fix one thing to make this sustainable. And we are starting to write those kinds of rules, those kinds of green IT practices for every cloud resource which is out there. And then our team members can start looking if the template is compliant with our reference architectures and if it is sustainable. I call it sustainable driven design of cloud infrastructures. I really like that idea, and that's where I'm pushing our teams to start using this in that way. Also, Microsoft, AWS, I was last week in Las Vegas at reInvent, they are starting to understand this concept that a team should be able to self-service such a cloud infrastructure constantly the same way, so that the applications which are going to land on that are constantly in the same way. And I'm working with Microsoft on a concept what they call developer environments, where a description of the templates are in a catalog, what you just saw, and that a team can provision that by themselves via a small self-servicing portal. So think about the scenario. You create your dev box. You go to this portal. You write your small code and say, I need to have a test environment. And you just select from the environment, create test environment. And because maybe a environment administrator has said, when you create this landing zone for a test environment, then it will be deleted in 3 days. Again, bringing more efficiency, how you are using those kinds of environments over and over again. This is how we are using our DevOps environments. And those DevOps environments, as you can see, they are quite efficient. You can start leveraging capabilities of the cloud to the max. And that's actually what I put up top here. Use the cloud for all your environments. It makes your developers happy. It makes things faster. And you can provision your test environments and your acceptance test environments very, very efficient. I've written down some more. I always like to put test in production there. Because then you don't need a test environment. That's where we need to work on with all of us. Test in production, then you don't need a test environment. Work in isolation, that's also a very important concept for us. Because when you can isolate items, you don't have to rebuild the whole system. When you can test an item in isolation, you don't have to rebuild the whole system. It's much more efficient, it's much more faster. Automate, standardize, and bring self-servicing to your teams to be as efficient as possible. Those are the practices I want to put in place for environments. Still, I'm always a little bit worried because in this way we are creating business functionality very, very fast. But then I talked with some experts around value streams, and there will be also a talk later this afternoon about this. And they were saying only 20% of the business functionality you create will be used. And then I'm silently crying. Because that's why I want to do it as the agile way. I want to deploy 100 times a day. Because then I know I'm building the right thing. That's why we are doing DevOps. And that's why we are using these DevOps practices all around the globe at an enterprise scale. Together with Microsoft and GitHub, we started to write papers about how we are doing this at enterprises. This is the first report we wrote in October 2020. It's about compliancy, governance, all those interesting concepts, what developers love. but very interesting, worth reading it. I will make sure that they are shared. The last one of the second one is about leveraging optimal the platform capabilities to build security in, but that's also where you can think about quality. That's definitely an important one. And then the last one is actually securing enterprise DevOps environments. That was roughly my talk about, but then from a security perspective. And when you look at the sustainability from the United Nations, social is there a very important part from. And when your systems are not secure, the social impact will also be very high. So securing all those environments is also quite important from a sustainability perspective, not only from a consumption perspective. Thank you very much. And I'm here around.
Thank you, Clemens. Thank you, Clemens. It was really useful. If anyone has some questions or anything, they can come to speak to you or just ask us and we can have a presentation with you guys.